Counting calories is not necessary to lose weight. In some cases, it might even be counterproductive and make it a lot harder for you. It's no secret that weight loss is a matter of calorie balance. There's no rocket science here. I'd argue that for the large majority of cases, counting calories is not even necessary, and here's why. The first is that it can be dangerous. One of the biggest arguments for counting calories to assist in weight loss is that it's a lot more accurate than simply estimating what we eat in a day. In most cases, our best guess as to how much we're consuming in a day is well below what we're actually consuming. The reality is that if you're not tracking, you're guessing, and by failing to establish a baseline of where you're currently at, you'll have no idea whether you're actually trending in the right direction or not. While in theory this sounds nice and practical, the catch here is that a lot of us will sometimes take counting calories to pretty unhealthy extremes. Whether you're someone who's just trying to shed a few pounds and be beach ready for the summer, or you're cutting down to an extremely low body fat percentage to compete in a bodybuilding show, a lot of people fall victim to the obsessive nature of counting calories. Its restrictive nature makes it so that we constantly monitor all incoming foods and cut ourselves off the moment we've exceeded a certain number of calories for the day. This can lead to a very unhealthy relationship with food and several different types of eating disorders. If you're someone with an obsessive personality, counting calories can be very dangerous for you. On top of that, it doesn't account for the fact that we are human beings with fluctuating appetites, not robots that should be eating a set number of calories per day with absolutely zero wiggle room. There will be days where you're hungrier than others. I'll have some days where I can go from morning till night with nothing but a single fruit in my system. Other days, I can go to an all-you-can-eat buffet and I'll be starving again within an hour of leaving. Our appetites can fluctuate a lot based on factors like hormone balance, our activity level, what we've already eaten that day, and even whether we're drinking enough water, just to name a few. Our bodies have an interesting way of regulating their own food intake in the grand scheme of things. Even if you might have overeaten a little bit one day, odds are your body will probably suppress your hunger levels the next day to compensate for it. The second reason is that it can be inaccurate. Just because you eat a certain number of calories worth of food in a day doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually going to absorb that much. Very often, the number of calories that we eat and the number that we absorb ends up being quite different for a number of reasons. The first is that different macronutrients are metabolized very differently. It's a lot more energetically expensive to break down protein than it is to break down fat. What this looks like practically is if you were to consume 100 calories of pure protein and then contrasted it with 100 calories of fat, you'd probably only absorb about 70 to 80 calories of the protein source while absorbing almost everything from the meal higher in fat. The fact that protein is one of the most satiating macronutrients is also probably why a lot of low-carb and low-fat diets have gained popularity in recent years for weight loss. By completely cutting out carbs or fats, you'll naturally compensate by increasing your protein intake, which will make you feel full faster and a lot less likely to overeat. Don't get me wrong, these diets have their own sets of problems, and personally, I would never recommend them for fat loss. But that's a discussion for another video. This is also one of the main reasons why it's often encouraged to up your protein intake if you're trying to lose fat. Along with the fact that protein is one of the most satiating macronutrients, by eating foods that are only partially absorbed, it reduces your overall calorie intake at the end of the day and makes it a lot more likely that you'll end the day in a calorie deficit, which will promote fat loss. And the extra protein will help in retaining lean body tissue on top of that. Second, the process of absorbing the food that you eat in a day depends a lot on how effectively that food was actually broken down in your system. One of the most common foods that's often studied and used to justify this point is nuts. They're very calorically dense, yet people who regularly incorporate them into their diet rarely have any weight management issues. This is because despite how energy dense they are, it was found that a sizable fraction of their calories are never actually absorbed. They make it through your digestive tract relatively untouched because they're never actually mechanically broken down. So they're excreted in the exact same form that they were consumed. Not only are we limited to the macronutrient distribution of specific foods, but on top of that, we have to think about whether we actually chewed it properly to make sure that it gets broken down in our digestive system. Finally, not all calories are created equal. This is usually in reference to whether the food that we're eating actually provides any kind of nutritional value or substance to our diets. It doesn't take an advanced knowledge of nutrition to know that you're probably much better off eating a diet with lots of vegetables, fibers, protein sources, and healthy fats than one that only consisted of cake and cookies. If all we cared about was hitting a specific calorie target every day, regardless of the identity of the foods we were eating, and only cared about calorie balance, we could theoretically live off of nothing but Nutella. Is that a good idea? Absolutely not. Can we get away with it strictly in terms of calorie counting for weight loss? For sure. That doesn't change the fact that it'll probably lead you to tons of nutrient deficiencies and decreased diet adherence just because the foods that you're eating are simply not filling enough. With all of that being said, there are some people who may still benefit from counting calories, but only under very specific and temporary conditions. Namely those who compete in sports with very specific weight classes like weightlifting, bodybuilding, combat sports, where the weight class that you end up in could make the difference between getting first and last place. These people are probably better off meticulously tracking their food intake only leading up to their competition. For the more general population that's just trying to drop a few pounds of body fat, rather than counting calories and focusing on what you can take away, you're much better off focusing on adding as much substance to your diet as possible, in the form of water, protein, and fiber. This simple mindset shift from what shouldn't I eat to what should I eat often takes away from the restrictive feeling of dieting and makes you a lot more likely to adhere to it in the long term. I think of it in terms of maximizing the return on the foods that I eat in a day. If it's not filling or nutrient dense, I'll think twice about eating it. Protein and fiber are the nutrients that contribute the most to regulating your appetite. So a large chunk of your diet should be a decent source of either or both. This is why the bulk of my diet is mostly plant-based and consists of things like eggs, high-fiber grains, beans, and vegetables. That doesn't mean that I'm some hyper-disciplined food yogi either. I love the occasional slice of cake and cookies. In fact, I rarely go a day without some form of dessert. But as cliche as it may sound, everything in moderation is a pretty good rule of thumb to live by, and I make it a point never to demonize any one specific food. Anyone who tells you that you should completely eliminate a specific type of food from your diet is either doing it for clicks, attention, or they're trying to sell you something to replace it. I've found that the majority of my clients make significantly more progress toward their weight loss goals without ever tracking a single calorie. Instead, we implement this really basic system where they'll show me photos of everything that they eat in a day. Having someone there to keep them accountable for their food choices is often more than enough to make them a lot more mindful of the foods that they're eating. This makes them think twice about getting the extra large frappuccino with extra whipped cream, 3 pumps of caramel syrup, and cookie crumble toppings from Starbucks. Let me know in the comments below if counting calories helps you when you're trying to slim down. Check out this video here to find out why it is that losing weight may actually not be in your best interest.